Since its release in March, Animal Crossing New Horizons has become a staple in the collections of millions of people all around the world, including our own. In fact, its game cartridge has barely left our Switch, as we found ourselves completely engrossed by its unique charm, leading to my girlfriend and I accruing a combined total playtime of over 300 hours in just a few short months, a feat which very few other games have been able to achieve. This has even led to Sierra assuring me that we'd never break up, as if we did, she would lose her island. I'm not sure what kind of light that shines on our relationship, but that's neither here nor there for this video, so let's just move on.
Is it a perfect game? Well, no, of course not. As with any game, there are some things that we wish were different. But because we were so captivated by New Horizons, we didn't want to jump right into the criticisms without singing its praises a bit. So, we're going to tackle this topic in the form of a compliment sandwich, by alternating between highlighting something New Horizons does well, and then something that we think it could improve upon, until the internet as a whole hates us for being so contrarian. Even with all this time, we haven't come close to fully completing the game, so there's a very good chance that we missed both good and bad things that won't be covered here, and this video simply reflects our time with the game. Many of the issues could be fixed by time traveling, but we didn't want to rip a hole in the space-time continuum.
But enough disclaimers, let's take a closer look at Animal Crossing New Horizons. Let's start off with something we think everyone can agree on. This game both looks and sounds fantastic. Every time you start the game and are greeted with the theme song, it feels like it's welcoming you home, whether it's been just a few hours or weeks since your last play session. This extends into the background music that you experience while playing that always perfectly reflects the calm, relaxing experience that your island provides. And while the graphics are definitely not on the cutting edge of photorealism, they are the same bright and bubbly graphics Animal Crossing fans know, with the high quality that Nintendo consistently brings to all of their games. The stylized, cartoony graphics fit perfectly with the upbeat tone of the game. We won't dawdle on this point for any longer though, as you'll be seeing plenty of clips and hearing plenty of music tracks over the course of this video. And I mean, come on. This point isn't really up for debate. This game is gorgeous.
When we weren't fishing, catching bugs, or chatting up villagers, a large amount of our time went towards improving our homes, tools, and even the island itself. To do these things, we had to take advantage of the new crafting system, which, as the name suggests, revolves around taking raw resources in forms such as stones, sticks, and wood, and converting them into things like furniture. This system is quite simple and intuitive, and in the early game it felt great to collect resources from the nearby rocks and trees, and convert them into one of the many craftable furniture options without having to wait for them to show up in Nook's Cranny. It struck a nice balance between just giving them away and making it grindy to the point of being tedious, like many other crafting systems. Most of the time, passively collecting resources while completing our daily self-assigned tasks would be enough to finish smaller projects, with larger projects only needing a couple of minutes of resource collecting to be completed.
However, this became less and less true as time went on. In our experience, just passively collecting resources while running around the island, we always had way more resources than we ever needed, even with frequent crafting. So unless you start crafting for the sake of crafting, which can be its own annoyance for reasons we'll explain later on, your home storage will start to be consumed by stacks and stacks of every different type of resource. And while this keeps the game from becoming grindy and in need of resources, except for wood, which I'm somehow convinced has a negative drop rate, we think there should be more uses for this rather than just collecting dust in our storage. Our suggested solution would be to allow major constructions that occur around the island, such as building a new home for a villager, bridges, stairs, etc., to be able to be partially paid off with raw resources that match the job's needs. So, a stone bridge could be paid off with stone, a new house with a mix of stone and wood, and so on. The resources could be traded at a slightly higher rate than their selling price in Nook's Cranny so that it makes resources feel more impactful, and it saves you a few bells along the way so some of the more expensive items in the shop aren't always out of your reach. This definitely isn't the case for everyone, but when we see crafting in a game, we usually have one of two reactions. either ew, crafting, or use it to craft some better gear or a more effective health restorer, but ignore it 98% of the time. Even games that keep it simple like Breath of the Wild, or games that have a deep and yet rewarding crafting system like The Witcher 3, it still almost always fails to draw us in. And from some of the people I've talked to about it, this seems to be at least a somewhat common response. Animal Crossing, on the other hand, has handled this beautifully. For the most part, but we'll talk about that later. It's not exactly the most complicated thing in the world. In fact, it's pretty straightforward and simple. Trade a few rocks and a piece of wood and boom, you got yourself a fancy cabinet. But it's not the act of crafting itself we enjoy, but rather what we receive from the crafting, which is a deep and expansive world of designing possibilities.
Just like in the previous games, you can acquire gear by buying it from Timmy and Tommy at Nook's Cranny, but the vast majority of items that fill your house and island will likely be made at your local workbench, where you can choose from a massive library of furniture, accessories, and other objects. And unlike many games where 95% of the gear is usually completely worthless and will never be crafted, more often than not, you could likely find a place for a craftable object on your island. And if you don't particularly care for it, it's very likely that it's being used by someone out there. On top of crafting them, many of the objects can have their designs and colors altered to fit your specific style. This personalization also extends to clothing and your island as a whole. Patterns can be made from your Nook phone that allow for any design you can think of to exist on your island, and terraforming allows you to literally sculpt your island into whatever vision you have. Some of the creations people online have shown off are truly remarkable. All of these factors come together to allow you to make an island that is truly unique to your design, allowing for it to be unlike any other.
From day one of Serenity's creation, we always knew we were eventually going to organize our island into several sections. A town square with some local shops to boost our economy, a bustling metropolis for our fellow villagers to frolic and enjoy each other's company, a complete museum with a beautiful entryway to show off our various fish-based accomplishments, and of course, Sierra and I lording above everyone else at the highest point of the island to keep everyone in line. But we knew this was going to require some serious financial backing and the ability to terraform a few areas, so we decided to place things willy-nilly at first and come back later to fix everything up. Well, when the day finally came, we went down to resident services to turn the island on its head, and that's when we discovered you can only move one building, build one bridge, or build one incline per day. Tom Nook had bested us once again. But seriously, this was pretty disheartening because this meant that it ended up taking several weeks to get everything where we wanted it. And then when we inevitably decided to completely change things once again several weeks after that, we had the exact same problem. This problem probably isn't as widespread as some of the other things on our list, but considering our 300 hours pales in comparison to some people's playtime, we figured at least someone else out there felt our pain.
The suggested solution for this problem isn't as fleshed out as our previous solution, but we think it's the right call. Just remove this weird restriction. It won't affect most players as they probably don't plan their islands months in advance like we did, and for those more avid players like us, it would remove the need to do one move or construction per day for several weeks. This wouldn't end up being game-breaking as you'd still be restricted by the amount of bells you have in your pocket. The rivers on our island have been through some significant shuffling over the months, and being able to demolish a bridge and schedule the construction of a new one in the same day would have made me very happy. Also, just a side note, but as someone who spends a significant amount of time playing The Sims and working off a grid-based system, another small issue I have with Animal Crossing is that it too has a grid system, but the grid line can't be seen. When moving all of our villagers' houses into a neat and tidy line, I found out the next day that I had accidentally placed one of the houses one row too far back, which resulted in yet another full day before I could adjust it. I've since created a custom pattern that I can lay down to measure space, but one quick fix for this issue would be to place a toggleable grid on the ground when in construction mode.
While soothing music, relaxing gameplay, and creating an island to call your own is certainly a large part of Animal Crossing's appeal, one thing we've yet to go into detail about is the true backbone of any good island: the villagers. Unlike generic NPCs who fill up the local town in most games, the villagers of your island really help define its personality. And because the player serves as a resident representative, you get to choose the perfect villagers to make your island feel like home.
For those who don't know, villagers fall under one of 8 personality types: jock, sisterly, normal, peppy, lazy, snooty, cranky, and smug. Each of these gives you a general idea as to what the character will do for activities during the day, how they interact with other villagers, and just generally what they'll bring to the island.
Want to have an island where everyone is ready to pump iron at all hours of the day and get complimented for the exercise you're totally doing? Load up your island with 10 jocks. Want to be surrounded by villagers who aspire to be in the spotlight and will compliment the outfit you're wearing even if you're in sweatpants? Surround yourself with a bunch of peppy villagers.
Personally, we prefer the more rounded approach to get a bunch of different experiences depending on who you interact with. But even if you were to do a fitness island or a star-studded island, we're willing to bet you'd still get quite the variety of individual personalities amongst the villagers you surround yourself with, even if they all fall within the same personality type. For example, on our island, we have 3 lazy-type villagers, and despite the fact that they share the same dialogue options and general activities, it still feels like each one has their own interests and hobbies.
Ozzy loves snacks. He always talks about them, is always carrying them around, and is generally just looking towards his next meal. Sounds simple and a bit boring when laid out like this, but we found it very relatable. As anytime we are around the house, snacks are usually one of our number 1 priorities.
Eric is what we like to call the bud of the island. To us, he very much exudes a vibe of taking the truck out for a rip and cracking the cold one with the boys. But at the same time, he's very sweet and always takes care of our flowers when we aren't around.
And finally, there's Claude. Claude is the village idiot in the most endearing way possible. I'm not joking when I say every time we interact with Claude, we're gonna leave laughing. Everything he says is hilarious, and he's constantly just doing his own thing without a care in the world. His floor is made of dirt, even after being gifted some lovely wooden floors. He regularly can be found talking to other villagers about topics that make little to no sense, and occasionally we find him outside with what we are convinced is bugged AI. He stands perfectly still, often for hours at a time, only to pull out a random object and never use it. No matter what we do during these mental lapses of his, he refuses to budge. And although it's definitely just a glitch, it's become a character trait at this point, perfectly encompassing Claude's chaotic and often confusing personality.
We're almost certainly projecting our own personalities onto these 3, as well as our other villagers, but we feel a genuine connection to them. We got excited whenever anyone decided to join us on our island, and felt genuinely sad when someone asked if we thought it was their time to leave. The villagers on Serenity are certainly its defining feature, and definitely one of the reasons we've returned so many times. Every time we loaded into the game and a special NPC was there to greet us, it always felt exciting. Sometimes it motivated us to jump on, even if just briefly, to partake in whatever small event they brought to the island, when otherwise we wouldn't have logged on that day. These can come in the form of a merchant with unique items in the plaza, a competition to see who can collect the most bugs or fish, or helping someone in need such as the frequently shipwrecked Gulliver. Every visitor feels unique and all of them are fun to experience. However, sometimes too much of a good thing can end up being bad for you. And this is true for the special NPCs, as there seem to be some of them that overshadow the others. One frequently forgotten NPC is Red, who serves a pretty important function to people like us who like to have our museums filled as much as possible. While we saw Flick, Label, Leaf, and the other special visitors quite a few times during our play sessions, Red has only appeared a handful of times. At one point, I signed in every single day for a month and a half straight and never once saw any trace of red. And even if I'm somehow forgetting about a random day or two in the middle that I missed, and he just happened to be there on those days, that's still a pretty low appearance rate.
At this point, I'd like to acknowledge that Animal Crossing is a game that's intended to be played over the course of months and even years. But at this rate, I honestly doubt we'll ever finish our museum, and that sucks, since it seems to be based on an arbitrary spawn schedule. If red appeared just slightly more often, whether it be the set schedule like the Turnip Merchant Daisy May, increasing the number of times he appears in a given month, or art pieces had a rare chance to spawn in Nook's Cranny, it wouldn't be as big of a deal, but the current implementation is leaving us pretty frustrated with the whole situation. I can recognize that having these unique characters appear much more frequently may remove their special nature and even make them feel like less of an event, but I'm sure Nintendo can find some kind of balance in the middle that doesn't make it take 90,000 years to fill the museum. Animal Crossing is a weird game to describe to people. I've had several friends ask me if they should pick up New Horizons, and I always have to stop to really think about how to answer that question. Because chances are if you describe it by saying, well, it's a game where you move to a deserted island, and then get indebted to a morally questionable raccoon, so you have to fish for multiple real-life months to finally pay off all the money you owe him, and then a bunch of animals move onto your island, there's a fairly good chance they'd look at you as strange than when you describe that one really niche anime you enjoy. When in reality, although it's hard to describe with words, this really is a game for everyone. We're pretty much the perfect example of that, actually. Sierra already enjoys somewhat similar games such as the aforementioned Sims, while my games of choice tend to be more strategy, story, or action focused.
Newer or younger players can use it as an introduction to gaming, as the slow-paced, zero-stakes environment provides a perfect starting point into the hobby. Achievement hunters can challenge themselves to collect every fish, bug, and art piece for the museum, while also paying off all their debts as soon as possible and collecting only S-tier villagers from one of the 1,000 tier lists that exist online. As we talked about previously, those with a more creative outlook can spend hours upon hours designing clothes, their house, and the island as a whole, and when they get the urge to switch it up, they can start all over again. Animal Crossing has a unique charm to it that few other games have been able to replicate, that allow for people from all walks of life to jump in and find a great deal of enjoyment. The lack of immediate goals means you can play how you want and do what you enjoy. It's a game that you can pick up for a quick 10-minute check-in if that's all the time you can spare, or you can pour hours into it every day. While most games are judged on their story, character development, or interesting and deep mechanics, Animal Crossing really tears down all the common perceptions of what makes a good game, and allows the player to make the game a product of their own creation.
Animal Crossing at its core has always been a game that revolves around repetition. Every time I log on, I have a mental checklist of things I'm going to do. Check the shops, talk to the villagers, complete the daily bonus challenges, catch a few bugs and fish, craft an item or two, and then close the game down for the day. For some people, this is why they'll never pick up the game, which is a perfectly valid reason to not want to play it. But for those who enjoy the game, they likely enjoy the familiar nature of each day's events, and because the game is obviously designed around this concept, there's always plenty to do. That being said, there are some places where the game goes a little too far and can get really annoying after playing for a while. The most notable offender is probably the most common complaint I've seen throughout the community, which is not being able to complete multiple of the same item at crafting benches or at the Nook Stop terminal. I'm convinced this is some kind of social experiment put in by Nintendo just to test how far they could push their audience to stay and play with their cute animal friends, before they lost their mind from having to spend 15 minutes creating multiples of the same object. The fact that they haven't heard the community's cry of simply adding a Build X button is beyond me, and I really hope they come to their senses and add it at some point, because crafting is a total pain right now. I'm going to rattle through some of the other annoyances and solutions we have rather quickly as to not make this video even longer than it currently is, which come in the form of having to create tools all the time due to your current ones breaking. I personally don't have a huge issue with this one as I'm used to it from other games, and it gives a purpose, albeit slight, to resources, but Sierra hates it with a burning passion. The solution for this could be to make the golden tools you eventually get from the highest tier of challenges unbreakable, to reward those who have put a ton of effort into the game and have something to look forward to during their play sessions. Certain characters, namely Isabel and Blathers, repeating their dialogue lines almost every single time you boot up the game. And once you've filled up the museum with fossils, have fun hearing about how much Blathers would love to buy your incredible specimen, but will instead just give it back to you this time. Either make these lines rarer, say 1 in 10 times to add some variety to the conversation, or just make them more quickly skippable. It would do wonders for speeding through these sections.
Finally, certain community events such as the June wedding season event and the Easter event had little to no variety to them. The wedding season event had you traveling to the game's photo studio on Harv's Island to help the adorable alpaca couple Reese and Cyrus celebrate their anniversary. Each day, Reese gives you a scene from their wedding that you try and recreate using furniture from your own catalog and special wedding furniture built by Cyrus himself. The upside is that this event was completely optional, but the downside is that an event that ran for an entire month got boring after only 3 days. On the 3rd day of the event, Reese asked me to do a photo of the exact same scene I did on day 1. The reward for completing the event is a piece of Cyrus's wedding furniture, which, although cute, was not a style that I would casually use around my island. And some heart-shaped gems which can be traded in for, you guessed it, more wedding furniture. I think it's unanimously agreed that the worst event since the game came out in March was Bunny Day. During this event, a suspicious-looking rabbit named Zipper T. Bunny shows up and says he's hidden eggs all over the island, which can be used to craft special Bunny Day recipes. And when you collect all of the recipes, you get one super special final recipe. This sounds good in theory, but there were 2 main issues. Number 1, there are about a bajillion Bunny Day recipes to find. Much like the wedding furniture, these seasonal items are probably not something you would want scattered all over your island. A few decorations here and there to celebrate the holiday would be cute, but there are so many recipes that for the achievement-averse people like myself, this event feels more tedious than fulfilling. And number 2, eggs were everywhere. Unlike the wedding event and every event since, the Bunny Day event was not optional. Sure, you didn't have to actually craft the recipes, but you couldn't fish, hunt for fossils, shoot down balloons, or even hit rocks without eggs being forced upon you. If you played Animal Crossing at the time, or even if you just had friends that did, I'm sure you saw at least a couple memes about how awful this event was. It got to the point where I was so sick of the eggs that I just stopped playing for the last 2 weeks or so of April. All of this was made worse by the fact that the game was still brand new, so players were excited to collect every fish, fossil, and balloon that they could, and iron was still a very valuable resource at this point, but it had a lower chance of spawning due to the eggs taking up space.
As Animal Crossing is a game that's intended to be experienced over the course of months, if not years, one of the best things that we've been seeing out of Nintendo so far is the seasonal and general updates they've been constantly providing to the game. With each of these updates, as well as just the change of every month, new things are constantly being added to the game to keep the experience fresh. Whether it's new fish and bugs to add to the museum, the look of the island changing, or even brand new gameplay elements and events.
So far, in addition to the 2 events that we criticized above, we've seen a Cherry Blossom Festival, a Summer Recipes update, the ability to go scuba diving in the ocean, August fireworks shows, and finally the most recent Autumn Recipe update. Each have brought their own unique feel to the island, and they all have been really great additions to the game. On top of all of those, there's also the monthly meteor showers, bug-offs, and fishing tournaments, as well as villager birthdays, which are always fun to experience.
I know we ragged on the events just a minute ago, and while I do stand by the improvements we think could be made, it doesn't mean we still don't enjoy them. and they do seem to be listening to at least some of the feedback along the way, as the infamous Bunny Day event was toned down heavily midway through, after some players were getting fed up with the ludicrous amount of eggs appearing on the island. It's still a bit early in this game's life to do too much of a deep dive on this, as many of the events have yet to be revealed, but one thing is for sure. These events are constantly adding free content to a game that already has hundreds of hours of enjoyment in it, and they don't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. Maybe someday we'll look back at this video and all of our issues we brought up will have been addressed, but until then, we're just going to enjoy the ride. Our final major criticism for this video is a simple one and may sound petty at first, but we're pretty sure this applies to every single player that has ever picked up the game. Raise your hand if the following has ever happened to you. Wake up from a dream about what you're going to accomplish today on your island, roll out of bed, pet your local cat or dog, get a bowl of cereal, make your way over to the Switch, boot up Animal Crossing and sit at the title screen for a full 2 minutes while the title music plays, say hello to your buddy Dom, go to the crafting table, and then want to throw your TV out the window when you realize you still don't have the recipes you need. This has killed our motivation to keep playing more than anything else in this game. Even acknowledging the fact that you're supposed to collect these over the course of months, and it's way better than any other version of Animal Crossing so far, especially considering I played the GameCube version that just had a few items every day, it can still be really disheartening to look at the 500 recipes you've collected so far and still not be able to craft basic necessities from time to time.
The very beginning of the game does a pretty good job of distributing some basic crafting recipes to keep you busy for a while, and then afterwards the game begins throwing recipes at you left, right, and center, from bottles on the beach, balloons, and villagers wanting to share their knowledge, but there are still some things that slip through the cracks that seem like they should have been part of one of the base sets that they sell in Nook's Cranny. For example, for the first 2 months or so of playing, Alex never once received a bed recipe. He eventually got a few recipes from themed events, but those don't fit very well into an average household.
We honestly don't have a great solution for this one. The game is already doing its absolute best to just constantly bombard you with recipes so that you can continually develop your home. It seems that sometimes you just get unlucky and somehow never receive basic recipes. The best thing I can think of is a weekly or so event similar to KK's concert, where instead of requesting a specific song, you could request a specific recipe.
When the fan base for any piece of media develops into a community, things can get weird. The fact that I don't have to mention any specific incident or group, and you can probably think of quite a few different examples, truly reflects how infamous some of these fandoms can become. But even if things stay relatively normal, Alex and I usually aren't the type of people who participate in any online discussion. At most, we'll read or watch content about it and discuss it amongst ourselves.
With that in mind, the fact that we decided to make our first ever video as a tribute to Animal Crossing is not only a testament to how much we enjoy this game, but also to how wholesome and welcoming the community is. Outside of this video, we still haven't really participated all that much, but we've kept track of the community's creations, and they are all so overwhelmingly impressive and positive.
Unlike other communities, it seems like everyone really is just here to share their love for the series and help everyone experience the game to its fullest. The few complaints we've seen is that after playing for hundreds of hours over about 6 months, they're running out of content. And if that's the biggest complaint you can muster, then the game is doing something right. As of the recording of this, Animal Crossing New Horizons continues to sell tons of copies every month, and recently became the #2 best-selling game on the Switch, so I'm sure that this community will continue to grow and keep making amazing content and memories along the way.
As we've noted a few times throughout this video, Animal Crossing is not an incredibly easy game to describe. Many of our thoughts about it are long, rambly, and even sometimes contradictory. There are many things that we absolutely love about it, and some things that make us wonder if Nintendo even thought about it at all during development. But the fact of the matter is, this game has been out for about 6 months now, and we still talk about it nearly every day. And when that happens, you know you have something special. This video doesn't even really have a point per se. Many of our ideas and opinions have likely been expressed more eloquently than we ever could, and it's way past its initial wave of hype, so we clearly aren't cashing in on the hope of going viral. Or if we were, we've made a grave error. We just wanted to express our love for this strange little game.
From the moment we boot up the game and listen to its wonderful theme music, up until the moment that we say goodnight to our fellow villagers and turn the game off for the night, we have huge smiles on our faces as we play this truly unique and charm-filled game.
We look forward to whatever new experiences Nintendo adds in the coming months. And when they inevitably fix all of the issues brought up here today due to the immense social pressure of a zero-view YouTube channel, you can thank us in the comment section below.
But until next time, please have a wonderful day from all of us here on Serenity.